Welcome to this brief presentation, Game Theory, Probability and the Development of Strategic Anticipation in Rugby. Hopefully you'll find it stimulating and fun. Game theory is the process of modelling the strategic interaction between two or more players in a situation containing a set of rules and outcomes. Each player has two or more choices. You can win or lose. All possible choices can result in an outcome. It's clear how you can win or lose. All participants understand this. All players are aware of the rules and are aware of what their opponents desire. All players are rational and sensible. So what does this mean? They are capable of making rational choices that result in maximum benefit. They don't know other players' choices in advance, so they choose based on assumptions. Their decisions are made on probable outcomes. Players can only be certain of their own moves, but they must speculate about their opponent's moves. Not just making moves on what they think is right, but anticipating on what their opponent thinks is right. Each player must know what their chances are of winning and what everyone else's chances are of winning, but also knowing what their opponents are guessing and what they may be guessing about them. Now let's look at probability. Probability is how likely an event will occur. For example, the chances that a person can fly unaided is impossible, and is therefore described in terms of probability as zero chance or 0%. However, the chances of getting a real number as a result of rolling a dice is certain, and certainty of occurring or 100% probability, since each of the 6 numbers on the dice is a real number. Let's look at the probability of getting a heads or tails from a coin toss. The probability is one option from two possible outcomes, which can be represented as 50%. If we examine the probability of receiving a face card, that is a jack, queen or king, from a full deck of cards, we can calculate that from the 52 cards available, 12 of these are face cards, and this equates to 12 over 52 or 23% probability of occurring. Finally, if we calculate the probability of receiving any queen, this would equate to 4 chances from 52 cards, which gives a probability of just a little less than 8%. Unlike mathematical probability, human behavior is not a pure science, since it's driven by subjective decision-making processes, influenced by emotions and relationships. It's continuously evolving, influenced by previous experiences, and is underpinned by each individual's unique personality and competence. Winning and losing are the outcomes of the total sum of effective or ineffective decisions and actions, individually and collectively during a match. Statistical analysis of effectiveness would indicate that to win a match, a team is required to achieve 54% effectiveness. So what are some of the key considerations which influence strategic decision-making, which in turn influence the probability of an event occurring? First is the score during a match. The closer the score between opponents, the less risks teams are likely to take. However, as the score between teams increases, so does the probability that teams, in particular the losing team, will take more risks. Time remaining should be considered in tandem with the score. As a game reaches its conclusion, teams are more likely and therefore a greater the probability that they will take more risks if they're losing, while teams in the lead will try to consolidate their lead, reduce mistakes and run the clock down. Key periods where teams tend to be focused on reducing errors are at the start and end of each half. As previously mentioned, the time during a match should also consider the score and indeed the next item, position on the pitch. Generally, the closer to their own goal line a team has possession, the less likely they are to take risks, preferring to exit quickly by using kicking strategies. The consequences of errors close to your own goal line are greater, so there is a greater probability that teams will prioritise low-risk strategies to move the ball away from their goal line as quickly as possible. The closer a team is to their opponent's goal line, the less space and time they have, so again, there is a higher probability that low-risk attacking strategies that guarantee continuity of possession are prioritised. Possession out wide near the sidelines may provide more width, however, it also provides the defending players an opportunity and therefore a greater probability they will advance quickly since the attack can only move in one direction. Weather conditions can affect performance in many ways. Wet, cold and icy conditions require players to take more time to handle and control the ball, hence defenders can advance quicker to apply pressure. Playing with the wind allows greater opportunity to kick for territorial gain, so defending teams tend to position more players deeper in anticipation of receiving long kicks. Playing into a wind deprives a team of long kicking options, so there is a strong probability that teams will choose strategies to maintain possession instead of seeking territory. The profile of opponents' strengths and weaknesses can also provide important information which influence strategic decision making. The profile relates to individual, unit and collective strengths and weaknesses. For example, individual players with poor tackling, contact handling or kicking skills, also players who lack size or athletic prowess. Targeting units, for example scrum and lineout, is also a probability if their profile is weaker. Generally, teams tend to play to their strengths while attempting to avoid their weaknesses. Individuals, units and teams with greater levels of competence have wider options available and less limiting deficiencies, and therefore are less predictable and are difficult to anticipate due to less restrictions. Whereas the opposite is true for teams with lower levels of competence, where estimating the probability of their actions is higher and therefore easier since the range of their options are less due to their competence. Linked to competence is confidence. Players with higher levels of confidence are less predictable since they are more willing and likely to take greater risks due to their lack of fear than the players with lower levels of confidence. However, a player with high levels of confidence without the corresponding level of competence may prove a liability and reckless. Every strategy can be labelled in terms of complexity or simplicity. Since this is closely linked to levels of competency, no one strategy is better than another if players are competent. However, the probability of failure is increased when the level of complexity is also increased. Since people influence and make decisions, the personality of these influential people will be reflected in the style and structure in which a team is prepared and plays. The probability is that coaches with high controlled characteristics will prepare teams which will rarely divert from their pre-match strategies during the match. Players with strong preferences for introversion may be more analytical and cautious than players with strong preferences for extroversion, who may be less cautious and more likely to take more risks. Linked to personality is the decision-making process and whether players have strong preferences for thinking or feeling processes. Players with strong thinking preferences will be guided by logic, facts, structure and details, and therefore are probably more pragmatic, while players with strong preferences for feeling processes will be guided more by instinct, belief and values, and therefore may be more unorthodox, but nonetheless not less effective. Next is the relationship between risk and reward. Lower risk strategies usually result in shorter distances, such as one-pass plays and drives, but if significant distance is the objective, then higher risk strategies are required, such as multiple passing strategies and some kicks. And as we've highlighted above, teams are likely to take greater or lesser risks depending on which principle of pressure they wish to accomplish at any given moment during a match. So creating opportunities that are less predictable and easily anticipated by your opponents based on the probability or likelihood from the considerations already mentioned would be an interesting perspective to consider and explore. But let's examine risk a little further. What is high risk and what is low risk? To simplify, a strategy that involves more players, more action, more decisions and greater distances is inherently greater in terms of risk. And the key to being more effective than your opponents when the opportunities are limited in a match is efficiency, that is achieving more with less effort or waste. However, as mentioned before, unlike mathematical probability, human behaviour is not a pure science since it's based on an individual's perceptions. Let's look at this from a different angle. Ultimately, teams are in pursuit of success, so let's start at the end. In order to achieve results, we must be more effective than our opponents. This requires us to apply more pressure through pitch position, possession, penalties and points. Our ability to apply pressure reflects the precision of our actions, which are preceded by effective decision making, which we interpret through our perceptions, which are influenced by our understanding, which are improved by our knowledge, which is determined by the quality of our preparation, which is dictated by the quality of our players, which is enhanced by the effectiveness of our coaches and their coaching, which are influenced and energized by their rugby vision and coaching philosophy, which ultimately must respect the principles and reality of the game. The application of game theory and mathematical probability to facilitate anticipation of opponents can be useful. However, it requires an understanding and appreciation of the relationship between the risks one is willing to take for the potential rewards, a realistic relationship between a player's confidence and competence, a willingness to overcome fear of failure in order to achieve success, and a healthy balance between one's ambition and a grounding in reality. Ultimately, It's about effective planning, effective preparation, and effective people. Probability in game theory is not a guarantee. Rather, it's developing an informed best guess based on what is most likely to happen based on the logic in any given situation where choices must be made. The challenge for coaches is to develop and encourage players and teams who are not predictable and who are comfortable choosing the unexpected, who are willing to take calculated risks that will result in the greatest potential gains rather than obediently following predetermined strategies and rigid patterns of play. Ultimately, how a team plays will usually reflect the personality, both strengths and limitations of their leaders and coaches. As usual, all these things are simple but not easy. Thanks for watching.